My purpose is not to frighten you, but to make you aware of what is happening around us. It is truly later than we think.
Well, enjoy the show.
Here's motion picture adventure and excitement to stagger the imagination.
Williams, I understand your husband is missing.
Yes,
Do you think he's dead?
Well,
Will you miss him?
Well,
Will you marry again? What if he's laying in a ditch somewhere, like with both his legs broken, calling your name? You will have to find another man, you know. You're no spring chicken.
Bitcoin! Well, enjoy the show. The thing is, come on, man. America could be described in one word. I was in the foothill of the Himalayas.
Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames, messieurs, welcome back to a new show with Tom Luongo as the guest. We're going to be talking about the Japanese bond market crisis that's going on. Don't see, okay, let me set the stage for maybe for new people who are just walking in, and for even from some of the old hats who've been paying attention to Mir and Chuck. Now, for some time, I walked into a world of poop in 2024. Didn't know this was going to happen. It started in 2023. Matt Erickson and I started talking about, mostly Matt, started talking about the the PayPal mafia. That got a lot of attention, but I also got a lot of pushback. And then somewhere in that year, I started tracking Carlyle Group, Bitcoin, the bond market, et cetera, which led me to make a few statements that a whole bunch of people in the dissident right did not like whatsoever, which perplexed me. They just wanted to blame the Jews and go on with their merry day. I didn't know that at the time. I thought we were like truth seeking and looking for answers to why these things were happening and looking for magic bullets and all. No.
Bad Jason, no biscuit.
Bad. I'm an eternal optimist. I'm an iconoclast, but I'm also an optimist. I contain multitudes, Tom. So
we all do.
I made a prediction, and the prediction was this. And people can go to Gumroad and go get Tales of the Shadow Empire Volume 1, which Tom was a part of as well, and hear me talk about. My prediction was this: that Donald Trump was walking into a bond market collapse / crisis / conniption between March and May of 2025. My thinking was this: is that the changeover from LIBOR to SOFR was going to cause the world's greatest margin call of all margin calls, essentially. Because I was looking at the derivatives market and my eyes were really pinpointed towards Germany, specifically because of the corporate bankruptcy rates that are going on in Germany. And I was like, that might trigger an insurance problem, which would trigger the bond market and dominoes, I'd heard about the Japan thing, but I wasn't paying attention to Japan. And then lo and behold, in May 2025, the Japanese bond yield, I think it was a 20 or 30-year bond yield rate, jumped up like 30 basis points overnight. Sure. And I was like, there it is. So, skipping ahead to what's happening just this past week, I don't believe in coincidences anymore. After the last 5 years, have completely disabused me of any of these kind of things. Yep. I don't believe that you have essentially a thrown together NATO summit, which is was just like we can talk about Erdogan with the loaded guns. I think that was perfect. But you have the NATO summit going on. You have Russia now threatening essentially a hot war. You have what else was going on this weekend? You had the MOU collapses, air quotes, bombing raids in Iran. All these things going on, and nobody in the mainstream media at all, in most alt medias, talking about what's going on in Japan, where their 10-year just jumped up 64 basis points, essentially overnight.
So 6 basis points.
I'm seeing
286.
Oh, sorry, 64. Sorry, 64 from the since January January
yeah,
this year
Sure,
when they
sure.
had the
That-
when they had the other big
yeah.
big
Yeah,
jump. Sorry, Mike.
Fair enough.
Thank you
Just
for
want to
correcting.
just want to make sure because
Yeah.
I watched the Japanese 10-year like a hawk. By the way, so
Right.
Just
So I'm going to throw this over to Tom. But just to give anyone who's coming in going, well, why do we care about Japan and the bond market and all that kind of stuff? Really briefly, and I'm sure Tom, you can fill us in even better than I can. But the bond market, whether it's regional or global, is where all your mortgage rates, insurance rates, all these things are tied to the bond market yields. As they go up, suddenly all your prices go up. Now they can blame that on inflation and they can blame it on a whole bunch of other things, but that's just the bond yield going up. So when bond yields go up, and by the way, the Japanese bond yield goes up, every single bond yield in Europe just spiked. The Bank of England's bond yields, their gilt prices jumped to an all-time high now. So we're going to see a massive correction globally, and this is happening all at once everywhere.
Okay. All right.
so
let's get
there's
into
a stage.
Sure.
Before you start, Tom, I just I'll do the show thing. Send if you have any questions or comments you want me to read out or address with Tom, send them as a super chat. It's much easier for me to keep track of. Or send them over to Streamlabs. That goes right in my pocket. Just let me know if you do, and I will check it and read those out as well. And of course, like, subscribe, and share the channel. Let the people know where we're at. Because we're coming back strong now, folks. I took a year off. I'm back now. And now I'm feisty. I'm a little bit angry. So
good.
Let's go.
Feisty is good. Feisty is good. Okay, so the Japan thing actually story for me started in 2022 when Kuroda decided to start widening the band on the 10-year. Right, they were doing yield curve control, and they're forever and a day. They were still at negative 0.1% on their benchmark rate. And then Kuroda started the process before he left the Bank of Japan, started widening the band. So, went from holding in a very tight 0.1% band to 0.25 on the upper end, and then 0.5. And then he leaves, and Ueda takes over the Bank of Japan. And interestingly enough, this is what I noted at the time, this is when it really got interesting for me. And I didn't quite understand all of what I think I understand today. This is very important. I make that abundantly clear. But I knew that was significant because when Kuroda's right-hand man, basically his vice chair at the BOJ, declined to take over for him when Kuroda retired in seniority-obsessed Japan, that was notable. And especially when he said, look, I was a major member of the team that was the architect of this monetary policy for the last 35 years. I'm probably not the guy who should be leading the charge going forward. And so this guy Ueda comes in, Kazuo Ueda, and so by definition, I'm like, oh, he's not Kuroda? Oh, okay, that's interesting. Everybody's complaining about this, like the usual suspects in London, the Financial Times, the Economist. Everybody's out there screaming about, oh my God, this is going to cause a bond crisis, then a currency crisis, and all this stuff. Like, oh, you got to watch Japan, watch the yen. God, I mean, all of this. I'm like, how about they're getting off the zero bound because Biden inflation in the United States, the post-COVID inflation, was hitting Japan hard, and there's no reason they had to allow the long end of the yield curve to start to rise. They had to get away from yield curve control. And eventually they took their time, and they got away from yield curve control, which is basically QE. And then they're going to start raising rates, right? So it's slowly but surely, it's tightening of the Japanese monetary system. Now, this is important because Japan is not the United States. The reason Japan is not the United States is because the Bank of Japan didn't just buy bonds like we did, or mortgage-backed securities like we did. Japan also bought stocks. So the Bank of Japan's balance sheet is immense, and they did what we like to call QQE, right? QE, which is bonds, and Q, the other Q is for equities. So they have a massive war chest of assets that they can use to ride this wave higher. This is Japan normalizing their monetary policy. Now, why was Japan at the zero bound for the last 30 years? Well, because someone needed to have a Tommy's podcast is in the house. That's hilarious. Someone has to be the issuer of Eurodollars, has to be the carry currency that everybody else can then borrow, at 0% in order to go get at a higher yield and then effectively print money globally. One of the problems with a lot of analysis about the global monetary system and certainly the U.S. Treasury market is something that I don't happen to agree with him right now, and certainly not since the switch over from LIBOR. But Jeff Snyder reminded everybody and taught me and a variety of other people that look, the Federal Reserve has never really been in charge of its own monetary policy since the rise of the Eurodollar markets in the 1950s. That's just the way weren't in control of pricing our dollars. The offshore dollar market was. Once it became bigger than the domestic dollar markets, then if there's no barrier and there's no arbitrage between onshore dollars and offshore dollars, then when they get a cold, when the offshore dollar markets get a cold, the Federal Reserve has to respond to it. Lack of a better, just to keep things as simple as possible. Okay, it's more complicated than that, but that's the TLDR. If the Eurodollar system gets a cold, the Fed is not going to be able to prosecute monetary policy to the fullest extent it could to benefit the American economy. Meaning, if the Fed starts raising rates and the offshore dollar markets, which are more leveraged, start to tank, then the Fed's going to have to cut rates before it wants to weed out the malinvestment in the United States economy. That's been the classic. If you just take a classic Austrian view of interest rates and just basically do, Austrian business cycle theory. It's not hard. Just understand that the failure of that to describe the last 70 years accurately is that it was really about the Eurodollar system. So now, LIBOR goes away, SOFR comes into effect. That Japan is going to have to start ending this policy because America is now in charge of the pricing of dollars because it's now the domestic dollar markets are now pricing dollars around the world. And therefore, if Japan wants to still be any kind of country, then it has to eventually, stop doing yield curve control. And so when Powell starts raising, and so again, let's go, this is downstream of the story when I go back to June of 2021, when Powell starts stealth tightening, the 5 basis points to change the world. Y'all have heard me talk about this a billion freaking times. You realize that the European banks, all the Bank of England, the ECB, and all of them, they all go along with Powell. But it's Japan is still the big source of their liquidity in keeping all of their dollar obligations afloat and keeping their bond markets under control, meaning it allows Christine Lagarde to run yield curve control on the entire European banking system for the last 4 years, right? It allows the Bank of England to continue to attempt to control the long end of the American yield curve, which they got when they took Fannie and Freddie off the market during the 2008 financial crisis, because now Fannie and Freddie can't make a market in mortgage-backed securities to control mortgage rates in the United States. So if you really look at it, I have to set all that stage before I can talk about Japan. So when you really stop to look at what happened after 2008, you have a Federal Reserve that's not really in control of the short end of the curve because it's not in control of monetary policy. You have Fannie and Freddie no longer controlling the long end of the yield curve through buying and selling making the market mortgage-backed securities, and therefore whoever is buying and selling our treasuries can then use that as a means by which to control our entire bond market from the shadow. Okay, and Japan is the liquidity is kind of the liquidity pump. If they get into trouble, they can always just tap Japan at the zero bound for as much money as they need. Japan getting off the zero bound and SOFR being in place now. U.S. and Japan are unwinding that entire trade, and it is, as you put it, Jason, at the beginning of the show, a kind of global margin call on this entire offshore dollar banking system and current and bond yield and currency and bond markets, but outside of the United States and most importantly, outside of Japan. Because Japan, the Bank of Japan has a massive war chest to manage the normalization of its yield curve. So then you have to ask yourself the question, if that's the case, then if all that's correct, then what you should be looking for is, okay, is there political coordination going on between American sovereigntists, i.e. Donald Trump, and the Japanese? And the answer is, of course, with Takaishi in power, yes. So if you want to make the argument that you made at the beginning of the show, that Donald Trump was selected to be put back into power, to do what's happening now, then guess what? So was Takaishi in Japan. Ueda has been running Japan's monetary policy to the best effect of the rate at which the United States wants to put pressure on everybody else, so that the United States can get control of its monetary system, switch over to the new stablecoin market, and do away to stablecoin economy, doing away with the Eurodollar economy, and Bob's your uncle, fuck you, Britain. This is the way the world is going to work. The response, the telling point in all of this, and as I was going, as all these things were popping through my head, I'm like, okay, I need data. I can't just hand wave this argument. I need data. Well, my longtime patrons know every Wednesday, every Sunday for the last 8 years, I do what I call my market reports, and I'm going over all of this stuff and continually adding more and more and more bond market data into the market reports to try and explain and show the data of how all of these markets are interconnected. Okay, tied to geopolitical events. I have a daily chart of the U.S. German 2 and 10 year spread going back to 2021, like with like big markers on it. Oh, by the way, this happened on that date. This happened on that date. Yada yada yada. So that's the beginning of that. The end of that story is, you're going to find this fascinating. The end of that story is when you start to really do the look at the relationship between UK gilts 10 years and US 10-year treasuries. And that's the most annotated chart I've ever done. It's insane. It gets more and more insane every 3 months. Like, I have so much data on this chart and so many points and it all goes back and starts with Japan normalizing monetary policy. And even when I put it together, I didn't even understand why Japan was so important. It only starts to really get to you after a while, and you're like, I have a thesis, but I'm not really sure I can defend that thesis until I kind of get the whole thing in my head. So now,
well,
I'm going to come to let me land the plane, and then
sure.
You come let me just land the plane. It'll only take me about 2 minutes. So the point being is that right now, what I can tell you is, if you look at the US-UK 10-year spread, what you'll see, or UK-US 10-year spread, what you'll see is that there's always a bottom in that spread just before the Japanese raise interest rates again. Each moment where the Japanese start tightening the screws on the UK market, the Bank of England collapses the spread between the American and UK gilts, the US Treasuries and UK gilts, collapses that spread because they're in charge. They're now using Mark Carney at the Bank of Canada as their liquidity token, and they're destroying Canada in the process, by the way. So there's 2 bits of data here that will prove this. One is that one. So there's always and then the Bank of Japan raises interest rates, and then the spread starts to blow out. And then the Bank of England gets a little bit more control, and they buy a whole bunch of treasuries, and they bring it back down, and then Japan raises again and again and again. So all 4 of the major rate hikes to 0.25, which was Black Monday of August 5th, 2024, and then the next 3, including what happened last week or 2 weeks ago when they raised to 1%, which was all timed, by the way, with the G7, the Iran getting the MOU, the ceasefire, Keir Starmer getting fired, all this stuff. It's all tied together, right? So the last thing to talk about, to remind everybody about, is that to prove all of this, that they're doing yield curve control in the United States, is that when you break down the central bank holdings, foreign central bank holdings of U.S. Treasuries by region, which is what I've done, not just look at the big total, which is like just $9.27 trillion, but you break it down by Europe, 9.27 trillion, 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 in the UK and all of its subsidiaries, all its satraps, that's the Caymans, Bermuda, the British Virgin Islands, Ireland, Canada, and you put those guys together along with Europe, basically the European Union, you break it down by that, Asia Pacific, and the rest of the world, you see clearly what the situation is, which is that the Japanese are managing their bond portfolio. Not really moving. It's not really moving up or down. It's down a little bit over time, but not a lot. Chinese have divested, and the Bank of England has gone from owning directly $350 billion in 4 years of U.S. Treasuries to over $900 billion. They're the second largest direct holder of U.S. Treasuries of any central bank. And it was interesting that you noted at the beginning of the show about the 30-year. What I want to tell you is that what I've noticed, watching all of this like a hawk, the way I've just described it, I hope I've like put my bona fides on the table, that I'm watching this carefully. The Bank of England plays in the 30-year market. You know why you can tell they play in the 30-year market? Because one, the 30-year market is less liquid than the 10-year markets. So they can move the 30-year market and then write headlines in the Financial Times, the Guardian, the Wall Street Journal, or whatever, easily. And they can propagate all that through X and social media and then use that to create fear porn. But it's really what they're managing, and they're using the 30-year to then, create kinks on our yield curve, like buying they sell 30s and buy 2s. They sell 10s. They keep the 10-30 spread really wide. They do all this shit, dude. I watch it like every day. Like it's like my entire life. If I showed you my watch list of the assets that I watch on a daily basis at investing.com, and you would be like, what in the actual fuck? Yeah, because I'm like, yeah, you're that big a geek, dude. I am, but I know that that's the story, and so Japan is purposefully grinding out the 2-generation old, or almost 3-generation old now, or 2-generation old yen carry trade. And I made the call at the beginning of the year and said that, if Donald Trump and company get their way, we're going to watch U.S. the Fed funds rate and the Japanese benchmark rate, lending rate, converge. And I said they're going to probably converge around 2%. Now, of course, who's fighting that tooth and claw? England, Congress, everybody. And so that's why Fannie and Freddie have not been removed from conservatorship yet. It's why these things are not happening. And so Japan has to keep doing the heavy lifting while they try to play their extended pretend game to wait Trump out and get control of the system again. And Kevin Warren, as Federal Reserve Chair, oh my God, it's like the greatest thing ever. But that's part 2 of this. So
what I found the big resistance, I think, for a lot of people to get through their head is that 9/10 of every single dollar in circulation isn't paper currency. It's not tied to anything. It's just a digital. It's just like a right.
Yeah, digital
and that just comes that explains the whole derivatives market. And to give people an idea, it's like, because you start talking about the bond market, and there's a bond market number we can look at, and there's like, the universal is whatever trillions of dollars, and there's your number. And then it's like, yeah, but there's also this derivatives market. And as you were saying, with the 30-year, the rules on bonds are not the same things as rules on stocks. So you can do a whole bunch of real funky things with bonds. So you can buy them, you can sell them, you can short them, you can split them up, you can
do all sorts of things with them. And
right.
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
And because they're not tied to any assets, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the elephant on toothpicks. That's the biggest problem we got right now. And that was the mathematical certainty that I was trying to warn people about. It's like, look, and this is also a good reason. If you're looking for a reason to celebrate Donald Trump, and I know people have their feelings about Donald Trump, and I know there's someone in the chat right now, Messiah, Okay, wait. Your choices were Donald Trump and his people, right? Because when we say Donald Trump, we also mean everyone's backing him, right? We can get into a little bit of that if we want.
Sure,
but
absolutely.
Or you had Kamala Harris, and if Kamala Harris had won that election, everyone's money would be on fire right now. Like, yes. Worst case bloody scenario globally that you can possibly think of. You'd be we either have World War III, a hot war with Russia, they're trying to save whatever they can, or they would just pull the financial kill chain and everyone would have been screwed. Like that's absolute total certainty. So if you had one good reason for Donald Trump being in office, it's that. And because you get Donald Trump, you get Scott Bessent, and you get Carlyle Group, you get Texas Oil, you get all these other big companies.
I'll
who
be
are
honest with you. You get J.P. Morgan,
right? Who are and evil J.P. Morgan, evil Jew J.P. Morgan. Here's the thing, though. They all said, "Nah, it doesn't work for me, brother." They did a Hulk Hogan. Doesn't work for me, brother. And it's like they're not playing this game. They didn't want the financial kill chain. They didn't want to have all their fun stuff or all their money and all their stuff is in America go poof.
Right.
They decided no. And that's why
they decided no. What they decided was conditions were ripe to take control of the global financial system away from London.
Right.
And Donald Trump getting elected in 2016 gave them that opportunity. And the whole Donald Trump is controlled by the Jews. That's a British psyop, folks. And I need you to get that. I need you to sit with that. I'm not saying that Donald Trump doesn't love Israel. He does. It does not mean that he doesn't want to see Israel survive. Of course he does. The question
or the
I have
Rothschilds or the Rothschilds aren't in control of a whole bunch of stuff and aren't evil.
They really
people.
aren't.
Yes,
I'm with the Ian Burlingame on this. They're the freaking lawyers of the trust. They're the trust agent lawyers that are written on all the trusts, but they're not but they're just the lawyers. Like the real money is the real people are behind the trust, and you'll never find that out because of trust law. Like this is reality, and I know it's easy. Everybody wants a simple answer. Like I get it. I want a simple answer too. I mean, the world is complicated. It sucks. It's there's a whole bunch of it's a mess. It's an overly complicated movie plot. I get it. It sounds like 2017 chess and all the rest of it. I get it. Yeah, there's a reason for that. Because someone is desperately trying to obfuscate what they're actually doing while still remaining in power. But I really want you to understand that if you sit with that premise that the Jews run everything, and you say, and you reject it, and you just sit with it. I had to go through this. I wanted to believe that at one point in my life. I really did. And I had to stop myself at some point. I remember Dexter White just kind of looking at me and go, dude, it's not that simple. It's a lot more complicated than that. This is not to say anything salutary about Israel. I don't really care. But there's the question I will ask you to do is not only sit with it, but then ask and meditate on this question: which Israel? No different than which Iran, which Russia, which England, which France, which US, blah, 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 blah. When you're dealing with psychological operations of this type and this magnitude, especially in the age of social media, where you can turn everybody into an ab-reacting friggin' poof-linking monkey, okay, including me, including Jason, including everyone, we're all susceptible to it because none of us are that, none of us are the puppet masters. And they all have a psychological profile on every goddamn one of us, by the way. When you realize that, then that's when you have to realize that they're going to try and make it as simple as possible. They're going to hand you an easy answer, and they're going to hand you the evidence that you're correct. They're going to try and make you feel powerful and smart by handing you bullshit. Okay? And then they're going to validate that bullshit by giving you a whole bunch of people working for them who also validate that bullshit. That's what they do. They're really good at it. If you're confused about things, it's the hallmark of a psychological operation run by an intelligence service. That's become rule number one in my life, right? Rule number two is there are no coincidences. Rule number three, rule number three is why do they want us to know that thing now? Why now? Why this? Why that now? That's the biggest question everybody should always ask yourself. So, Jason, you and I could sit here for the next 24 hours and go through and do 2 hours on 10/7, do and how that fits in. Do 2 hours on 9/11 and how that fits in. 2 hours on the 2008 financial crisis. We could do this, and it would be exhausting for you, me, the audience, and everybody else. This is why you got to do it in bite-sized chunks. We decided tonight to talk about the Japanese bond markets because why now is because all of a sudden London wants you to know that Japan is about to blow them up. And what they're going to do is every time Japan does something contra to what England wants done or the Bank of England wants done, they send their minions out there to tell you a fairy tale that the yen carry trade is going to blow up and it's going to take down the world. I literally had a friend of mine text me one day, and smart guy, crashed out over the Iran war and so he and I haven't been on speaking terms for a couple months. But I remember him asking me about a year ago or so. He's just out of the blue, I got a text from him. He said, "Why did the world not end when the Japanese yen carry trade blew up?" I'm like, maybe because it was never the world that was going to blow up. Maybe it was somebody else who had to blow up, who blew up and then had to turn around and colonize some other country in order to keep their markets from blowing up. And the person who blew up and the person who got colonized, the person who blew up was England, and the person who got colonized was Canada. That's why they inserted Mark Carney into Canada. Because when you look at the tick report every month, you'll see Canada's holdings of U.S. Treasuries go up by $50 billion one month and then down by 60 the next month and up by 50 the next month. And guess what? That money always somehow winds up laundered into the European banking system, mostly the Bank of England, but then there's BVI, and then there's, the British Virgin Islands, and then there's others, and it's everywhere. And that's a superficial analysis of what's actually going on. Like, I have a third grader's understanding of what's actually happening. Okay. And what I might have put out to you might sound like a PhD thesis. And I'm telling you, I still feel like a moron when I don't understand all the mechanisms. Okay.
My background is, mostly in hospitality, is, working in bars and managing all that kind of stuff. So the only kind of up I have on some of this is that I understand, I had to learn how to read people really well, right? Because that's important for sales, and just also knowing, you just kind of get used to people, especially people in altered states, let's say. So that's the only kind of up I have, is that oftentimes I'll just cut through the nonsense and go, okay, what's because a lot of times people get into emotional arguments or they get into the motivation arguments, and that gets us into weirdness, right? But you can cut through and go, who does this benefit and why, right? Like, why are they making this move now? And you can kind of just simplify it. It's like, the majority of these people aren't evil in the classic sense, like, Saturday morning cartoon logic. They're just incredibly selfish, greedy MFers. That's it, right? They're not terribly bright, and they've been put in a position to kind of carry a whole bunch of water. And the smart people are behind them, who are stripping the copper out of the walls. Like, I think we see the whole thing going on in Europe right now, the whole digital panopticons and all that stuff. They're rushing real fast to lock things down so that they can. So that they can distract everyone over here, lock it all down, strip the copper out of the walls, and off to Dubai they go, right? Which I think was always kind of the plan. We were talking about movies before we press play. Yeah. I keep going back to Children of Men constantly.
Which, it's funny. I've never seen Children of Men, I know it's a hole. I know it's a hole in my oeuvre.
Gotta watch that
word, because it always makes me laugh whenever I hear that word, because it's such a fucking terrible word. But go ahead.
It's like ennui. But ennui. Maybe we can watch it together, or we take some notes if you sit down and watch it, because I don't really get into the whole future programming stuff that much. I think a lot of that stuff is just hoo-ha. But that movie keeps coming back around, going, that's, I think, in many ways exactly what they had planned, right? Lock everything down and strip it all out, and then off they go, right?
Yeah, well, and I would agree that Dubai was one of their bolt holes, and Donald Trump took that away from them.
Yeah, which is beautiful.
Which I just sit back here going, this is a really good cigar.
Isn't it?
Sorry, it is.
Well, I think Turkey was also maybe one of their ideas. Cyprus. Cyprus is now starting to come back up in the news. Because it's
that's where all the forex, like the shitty forex trading sites are. They're all
Right.
Cypriot. Some of them are run by Russians. Many of them are run by Britain. As a matter of fact, I find it really funny that I use, because I'm cheap and I refuse to buy a real data service. I use investing.com and I just pay them $100 a year to not deal with ads. Right? Hi, King Pilled. And I had the distinct pleasure of getting to meet Matt down in Texas a couple weeks ago
Yeah.
when we went to see Rush. It was great. It was a lovely time, and his posse was awesome, by the way. So just now got to shout that out. But it's funny, I use investing.com knowing full well that it used to be Forex Pros, right? And then they bought then they bought the thing investing.com, and it's clearly a British run Cypriot thing. And like, I find problems in their data sets all the time. I find, like, there used to be a ticker symbol for the UK US 10-year spread, and then they canceled it. It's almost like they canceled it the minute I started talking about it on my market report. I'm like, 3 months later, they just stopped the series. I'm like, okay, whatever.
No one's interested. No one's interested in that data. What do you want to know for that?
But I've come across that like 3 or 4 times. It's not like once, right? And it's just funny. Like, I watch them, manipulating the data on like weekly bond closes and like all sorts of weird shit. And I just find it really funny. I mean, some of it is it could just be, bad Indian coding. Like, there's that too. Like, but I've just noted the irony of all of this, that I use a Cypriot, obviously British offshore, data service for all of my analysis. I kind of find it funny. I'm like, here you go. This is all the money that you guys actually deserve, is my $100 a year for making the site usable, for not serving me ads. But you don't get. But I'm going to take you down to the studs, politically, in the process.
We're old enough. We're old enough, Tom. We're old enough to remember when the Greeks were the Jews.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, no one had Jewish accountants. It was all Greek accountants. You wanted a good Greek.
Yeah.
You wanted a good Greek in there. Yeah. Ever my Greek joke?
So,
you want to hear my Greek joke?
I'd love to hear it. Go ahead.
When you're in Greece, never buy a goat from a man named Stavros, because his name is not Stavros, and that is not the goat.
There's only, for the most part,
you can use it for Persians as well, but
there's only one Greek joke, which is, it has to do with pederasty and anal sex, but generally speaking,
family show. It's a family show, Tom. Come on.
But it's the family. I'll keep it there. That's all. I won't go any further. There's plenty of Italian jokes. It's mostly about our inability to make war. So
you can make it. You just can't finish it. That's all. Halfway through, you're like,
you can't make a decent rifle.
What side are we fighting on?
We can't make a decent rifle. Come on, like. So I mean, but the way I like I used to joke all the time. I was like, about Italian cars. Like, Italians don't make cars to drive them. They do, but they don't really. They like to make beautiful cars. They don't necessarily. Every once in a while, they make a good one. But that's not the purpose of making the car. The purpose of making the car is to make a beautiful car. The Maserati, like I used to say, like, that Teslas are just ugly quattroportes. Like, the quattroporte is a beautiful car, right? But the Tesla is like the Model S was clearly a quattroporte that had been hit with a shovel, and that was Elon. I created that joke in that article where I was talking about Tesla and the quattroporte and all that.
Elon's a bit of a brutalist. So, but did you see his last quote? We'll get back to the bond market in a second, folks. But his latest quote is that he thinks that SpaceX will be worth more than the world. I'm like, I don't even know how you do that math, actually. But
unless he's talking about how the SpaceX is going to be colonizing the solar system. I think that's
right. Yeah,
that's where Elon, like Trump and a lot of other and a lot of people, like, they live in the future, and God bless him. No, and God's bless him for doing so, because you have to have people who want to live in the future in order to be able to build the future. You have to have these people who are aspirational in that respect. It's something that Susan Kokinda said to me one day. She said, Trump talks about his golden age all the time. He's like, I just think he lives there already, and we're just like we're just trying to play catch up. He keeps talking about how how we're going to have this golden age. It's like Trump already inhabits it. right?
He has the toilet. He has the toilets already there.
Right. Oh,
Like,
I know. We're gonna obviously.
Okay, so when we talk about economics like this, always two big questions come up. What's coming next, and can people do about it? So
Okay.
we'll try to avoid the big alarmist language because, and this is something I kept trying to say. I kept trying to say 2 years ago to people is that I can't tell you what's going to happen in your given area. Like Australia here is much different than the UK.
Sure.
So even though they run by the same a-holes, it's just like it's a different thing. I don't know how things are going to go down in wherever you're living, and I don't know your own personal finances. So like this could be good, bad, the ugly, or things can happen and it doesn't really affect you. It depends on what you have, what you don't have, and where you're at, right? So we'll try. I don't like getting into the whole doomer mindset language.
No, I won't. I don't need. We don't need to do that because here's one of the things I'll tell you. Like, so, the Bank of England is going to have to, and the ECB and the rest of them, they're going to have to divest their their U.S. Treasuries in order to defend their currency at some point. That's what they're going to have to do, right? So, but the rest of the world gets a vote, and so does the American economy, and so do American investors and everything else. So, I don't get upset when I see a U.S. bond market move up to a quarter point. What I mean by that is the following. You watch like the 10-year and it goes up to, it went from 4.15 to 4.25 today. And like, it's a big, huge, oh my God, we lost 10 basis points in the US 10-year. I'm like, okay, talk to me at 4.25. Is there a bond auction next week? Yes. Okay. Well, let's see what happens at the quarter point, because central banks are not sophisticated traders. They're not buying 4.35 versus 4.25. They sit on the quarter point. So, for example, I see a big move in the last week or so on the US 30-year. For example, as a matter of fact, I just got a text from a friend of mine who just texted me a thing from Zero Hedge about the 30-year bond auction, because this is really interesting. This is a perfect segue to the kind of thing that I want people to understand. So last week, 30-year was trading about 4.9%. Okay. I'm like, wake me when it hits 5. Make me when it hits 5.10. Yeah, 5.15. It goes to 5.25. Right. Okay. Now, yes, I do channel EM and Blaine Holt. I think they're, but Blaine's enemy gets the vote thing is very, very important, guys. So wake me when it gets to 5%. We got the 5%. We got the 5.06 in the last couple of days because of all this stuff that was happening. Okay. Stellar 30-year bond auction today, because the central banks came in and went, ooh, I can get 30-year U.S. debt at 5%. And they come in and they buy like crazy. And so I watch bond auctions this way. And, I find Zero Hedge to be, almost unreadable anymore. But their bond auction reports are always very good. They're still some of the best signal on the site. So, when you want to watch you're going to look at the report on the U.S. bond auctions, I think it's always instructive to, pop over to Zero Hedge, see what's going on. And a stellar 30-year auction made perfect sense to me. Okay. So that's going to put a cap on yields, because the central banks all stood up on the quarter point, or in this case, the full point. And when I mean by quarter point, 4.25, 4.5, 4.75, 5, 5.25, 5.5. They don't play around between that. Bond traders slice and dice those 5 to 10 basis points in there. Central banks don't. They just come in and buy indiscriminately when they can get a good deal at a quarter on the quarter point. And you see it all the time. You can just draw horizontal resistance lines. Like you just draw the 4.25 in, the 4.5, the 4.75 on the US 10-year at 4%, and you'll see it. It shows up all the time. And I've been working on that. I've been working with that, model in my head for a long, long time. I've taught my patrons how to look that way. It's the way I do a lot of the analysis of what I'm seeing in the market. So, Japan, again, going back to Japan, they need to get the 10-year benchmark rate above their felt inflation rate. Otherwise, Mrs. Watanabe is going to get really angry. But now she can get 4% on her 30-year, or 4% or even 4.5% on the real long end of the Japanese yield curve, 20, 30, 40, 50-year bonds, because they issue all of those. The 10-year trading at 286 is that's the Japanese can finance that debt. Because they have a massive trading partner called the United States. The United States does not care if Japan weakens the yen. You'll notice that Trump never complains about the yen hitting a new all-time low. He never says anything. There's a reason for that, because he understands, and Besant understands, that Japan is our best ally in this, because Japan's going to buy our oil, and that's so Trump did his part. He got oil prices down into the 70s. That gave Japan the opportunity to weaken the yen from the high 140s to the low 160s, and allow the yield curve to blow out on the long end so that they can attract capital. They can attract, investment capital, and they need those spreads. So to finish off one last point about the way the Bank of England is manipulating our bond markets, I woke up one morning, this is in the market report, and one day, the U.S. UK 10-year spread was exactly the same as the U.S. 210 spread. Now, the 210 spread is how banks make their money, right, on normal lending, right? The 10-year benchmark rate versus the 30-year mortgage rate is how we determine whether or not we're going to buy mortgages or not, right? And because the banks need to get a certain premium there. So what did I know? I said, oh God, please don't tell me that the Bank of England is managing the 210 spread, the domestic 210 spread, by managing the UK US 10-year spread. And so I spent an hour or an hour and a half grabbing all the data back for like 2 years and putting it into the chart and normalizing it and having to strip out the days where one didn't trade versus the other and all this shit. Pain in the ass. Oh God, the data sets are terrible, and I'm a Luddite. I don't use AI for any of this. I don't write scripts because I don't know how, frankly. And put this chart together, and what did I find out? What did I see? That when Japan was still in the process of running yield curve control, there was no correlation between the two things. The minute the Japanese started raising interest rates off the zero bound, almost a lockstep. All the volatility dropped off, and you could just see the curves converge. And I'm like, oh, you motherfuckers. Like, I know, family show. Oh, my God. It was right there. And then I sat down and talked with another friend of mine who's, and he's like, oh, yeah. And then think about how they're managing the 10-30 spread, the 10-year yield versus the 30-year mortgage rate spread. And you're like, oh. And that validates all of the discussion about why they're fighting so hard to keep Fannie and Freddie off the market. And you can see it. I live in FinTwit, right? I live in the financial end of Twitter, or at least I used to. I don't know. And you can see how people are constantly wanting to gin up a problem with Japan, wanting to, then there's the whole Fannie and Freddie story. That's been a mess in social media, counter signaling everywhere. But I'll tell you, they don't want us having control over our bond markets, because the minute Trump has full control over the bond markets, that way he can then implement properly an end to Keynesian style monetary policy from the Federal Reserve, dominated by the Phillips curve, the relationship between inflation and unemployment. And he can then run the domestic production process that he wants to run, the whole Hamiltonian thing, by lowering interest rates. There's an operation running when they're all trying to turn Kevin Warsh into a hawk, and all Kevin Warsh wants to do is lower interest rates. But they can't lower interest rates until Trump has political control over Congress, which is dysfunctional, non-functional, if not in full opposition. You've got a judiciary that's dysfunctional, non-functional, and in full opposition. And you've got a midterm election coming up that is unknown. The bond markets will not give Trump the what he needs until he can solidify political control over his domestic enemies. Because if he can do that, well, then the bond markets will go, oh yeah, I'm all on board, dude. Like, let's do it. And then we'll drop mortgage rates, and and we'll kick this economy off. And Trump was out there the other day saying, "Why did we accept 2%, 3% growth? Why can't we accept 13? We can run 13%, but we've all been taught this Keynesian dogma that is retarded for a variety of reasons, and so I won't do the doom and gloom thing. What I'll tell you is everybody who's out there screaming that Donald Trump is owned by the Israelis, I got news for you. You're carrying water for the people who are impoverishing you and want to enslave you. Stop thinking that you are informed, wise, and insouciant because they fed you it, and you're just mushrooming. You're fed bullshit and kept in the dark. Like, this is what's going on. This is the fight. This is not to say that Israel doesn't have, crimes it needs to pay for. It is not to say that Israel has not done terrible things and helped them in the past, meaning the Brits and Davos or whatever, helped them in the past or been, part of their control system. They have. But Trump is blowing all that up. Literally tonight as we speak, he's doing part of that in Iran right now. And that's the bigger picture. And so to me, it's always an order of operations. So the order of operations here is you got to let Trump get control of the situation domestically. He'll fix the problems that we have with Israel and in the Middle East because he's got partners now there to put Israel on a leash. Not the least of which is the guy he just schmoozed the other day, who was Erdogan in Turkey. So
the Erdogan thing is very interesting. Part of my work too is examining the Orthodox monks from Mount Athos and made a series of predictions. Many of them prophecies, providences, whatever you want to call them.
Sure.
Many of them have come pinpoint true about COVID, and one of the more interesting ones, especially around World War III, was the quote goes something like this: "Is that brothers, one day you'll wake up and you'll read in the newspapers that Israel has struck the Iranian nuclear facilities."
Mm-hmm.
And I remember waking up and doing my thing and sitting down, and because of the time difference, I'm sitting down with my coffee and reading the headlines, and I read that almost exactly that headline and did a spit take. I'm like, here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
And part of that prophecy is that eventually Erdogan will leave office, which we know he's set to leave in 2028. His replacements will be sort of more of a young Turk kind of 2.0 group will come in, and
right.
that will set them on a collision course with Russia. And if you see what Russia, I think, wants to do with the Black Sea and all that stuff, that makes a lot of sense as well. Especially if you get that remnant, right? That City of London remnant getting into Turkey and doing stuff as well. Now, I think the interesting thing here is I think Team Trump knows all this. There's a few interesting things that people kind of sleep on that Donald Trump has said in the past. One of the ones that keeps sticking in my head is that he said almost offhandedly, if we're all very smart, we can avoid World War III. And it's about a year ago, right?
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a very good one, right? That was right before, and there was when they were going into negotiations with Russia and all the rest of it. I personally think, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Well, let's do this. I'm being very open. I'm being very open-ended on this. That I think that the deal with Putin has already been made. A deal with Xi has already been made.
Yes.
A deal with other players have already been made. And now now the whole idea is to give us a show and disrupt things as they go, right? To keep everyone off kilter, because that's what Trump's been doing ever since he took office, is keep everyone off kilter while all these other little things start popping up and little pieces, little moves are being made that formalize the trap. One of the big moves that got very underreported is that Trump opened up the purchase of or backing of retirement funds by private equity groups.
Okay, I want to keep going. I want to hear where you think that leads, because this is. I'll be honest with you, Jason. This is off my radar. So I'm Well, I'm willing to listen to what you have to
So
say.
I
about
think all of this leads back to one of my big nodes, which is Carlyle Group.
it.
And I said that. So I'll tell you my little diatribe
Sure.
on
I want to
this.
hear it. I want to hear it.
When Trump was running for office, one of his big points was, he's going to build this big golden dome, right? He's going to Space Force, Golden Dome, all this stuff. That's reeking right back to SDI. That's Carlyle Group, right? So the original SDI Group, Star Wars under Reagan, all the rest of it,
Right.
that was owned and operated by Carlyle. Carlyle was doing all that, all the missile programs, all that stuff, post Cold War.
Right.
And then they get shunted by the Clintons originally, and then they get shunted again by Obama. Basically, almost a whole bunch of their operations shut down or defunded. So Trump comes back in, and when Bush Jr. came in, he was all about missiles. Right before 9/11, he was talking all about missiles. In fact, he went to the Russians and tore up the
Intercontinental ballistic missile.
Yeah, exactly. And said, and the Russians like, what? We build missiles now? You go, oh, we're building missiles now. The Russians like, okay. And the reason why the Russians have such a massive amount of missiles and missile technologies, because they were like, well, fuck it. If they're building missiles, we're building missiles, right?
And missiles.
9/11 happens. Right. So 9/11 happens. A lot of people want to make 9/11 a Carlyle Group operation. I don't think it was. I think the Carlyle Group profited off of it, but they're not. That wasn't interesting to them, because war to them is not the moneymaker. Making missiles is great. People using them, not so great. Like, use them a little bit, but don't give us all the orders all at once, because then all of a sudden, if we can't fill them, you're going to go to our competitors. We don't want that. We want to be the missile people.
Okay.
So now you have Donald Trump coming in. What I thought was really interesting leading up into the 2024 election is that associates that used to work with Carlyle went and bought up the voting machines, right? That's that, and they exposed a link to Venezuela. They went in and bought up all the Dominion. Right about 3 months after, right after the failed assassination attempt at Butler, and right before the election. This is when all of a sudden Biden started wearing the hat, to put the MAGA hat on, stuff of that. He also went over on a Thanksgiving to one of the founders of Carlyle Group. All this leads up into the election. Election happens, right? Hooray, Trump wins. Kamala Harris, in her loser speech, recites a quote from Thomas Carlyle, who is the Scottish 19th century Scottish plebis whose name was used for the Carlyle Hotel, which is the Carlyle Group is named after that hotel, right? So there's your link. Now, ever since Trump's been in office, he's been making tons of moves that work out for private equity, which is where I want to get your opinion on this. Because now, as we move into the bond market stuff,
can I add one more piece?
Sure, of course.
That puzzle. Where did Jerome Powell work before he was Federal Reserve Chair?
Carlyle Group.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Just want to make sure we're
who has connections all through the Middle East, especially in the UAE. Carlyle Group. Who would really want to see a greater Israel project, quote unquote, right? Erupt all over the Middle East, so they can solidify their assets over the Middle East. Carlyle Group.
Well,
who owns Dunkin' Donuts? Carlyle Group. Which is an interesting little fact about it.
Again, I'm not sure that it has to be that single variable.
Just to be clear, I'm not saying that the Carlyle Group is the new Davos, is the new whatever. I'm saying there's
a through line here.
Right. They're a big giant party that's sitting at the table, along with Texas Oil and a few other people like Jamie Dimon and the rest of them going, know what? This is and this is our plan. This is what we're moving forward. We want Space Force. We want Golden Domes. We want drone technology. We want to fund American dynamism. We love what they're doing over. We want all that because that's our thing. We're the military industrial complex, and we're going to start moving our muscle now.
That may be the case. I think that the other side of that is, why don't we de-escalate the Middle East so that the United States doesn't have to be the ones that actually have to be on the hook and the guarantor for all this? And why don't we just get everybody in the Middle East on board with taking care of their own stuff, and they're all going to have to buy missiles for themselves in order to protect themselves from each other. Remember, let's do the London angle on this, or the anti-London angle on this. Before the 12-day war, London, Davos, France was clearly, and Paris clearly involved in this at a certain level. When you stop and get rid of all the bullshit, all of the religious, quote unquote, religious nonsense between the Jews and the Arabs and the Shias and the Sunnis and this and that, all that stuff, throw all that away. All that's mostly nonsense. London controls Israel. They control Iran. They control Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE, Oman, blah, 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 blah. Everybody forms a different part of the vertical structure of the quote unquote specter, for lack of a better term. You've got the money laundering center in the UAE. You've got the LNG export terminal in Qatar. You've got the MI6 listing post on the Strait of Hormuz, Oman. You've got the agitator on the other side, the Hermit Kingdom, the IRGC, otherwise known as a private equity group that just happens to be a military. That's what they are. They're just a private equity group. That's what they are. So is the Turkish military, by the way. The same structure. They have their own businesses. They have their own, and they pay their guys. So they're not paid by the Turkish taxpayers. Same thing with the IRGC. They're just the guys who get all of the no-bid contracts to build all the schools and the roads and the this and the that and everything else. And then they funnel all those profits along with the organized crime and the this and all that other stuff. And it all flows into the IRGC, and none of the money ever gets to the Iranian people. All that's been blown up. The Netanyahu is trying to. I think he's just trying to. The last gasp is to secure Israel's future. And stay out of jail. I can read Netanyahu a variety of different ways. I'm not sure which way to read him. And what did I say earlier? What's the first rule of geopolitics today? When you're confused about something, it's an intelligence operation. So Netanyahu as a thing is an intelligence operation. I have multiple versions of Bibi running through my head about who and what I think he is. Very few of them are salutary. Oh, by the way, but the one that is that nobody ever talks about is, what if he's just an Israeli patriot? No one ever asked a basic question. But again, I don't like Bibi Netanyahu. I think he's a terrible person. I think he's a sinister person. I also think he's very good at what he does in, quote unquote, protecting Israel's interests. And if Israel is not the prime mover, but is the vanguard of whatever this thing is, same thing with the IRGC and all of it, then at the end of the day, what if 90% of what Netanyahu does is simply, how do I protect Israel while still having to negotiate with the friggin' British who, fund all of this political opposition to keep Israeli politics messy, very messy, to the point where most Israelis don't even understand what's going on in their own country. From what I've been able to gather from the people that I've talked to about this, you have the same problem in Iran with the IRGC and the mullahs, right? So the whole war itself is a forever war that was designed on purpose to be able to just turn the dial up on chaos whenever they need it. And there's Netanyahu, and he sees Trump, and he sees what's happening in the United States, and he says, maybe this is my opportunity to finally get Israel's independence. Okay.
Sovereignty is I think the biggest word on the board.
Yep. Since
2016. Right? Because people have used the word. I mean, I come from Quebec, right? So we always had the sovereignness kind of idea, right?
Right.
But it was all lip service. It was all like, it was LARPing, it was bullshit. Because no one even knew what the word meant. Sovereignty from what? Do what? To make your own. What are you going to do? Right.
Right.
Now all of a sudden, 2016, there was this little crack in the window, right? And people could smell a little fresh air, and they're like, "That's what sovereignty actually might be." Oh wait, we could maybe have the sovereignty thing. Brexit, so now
Trump, Orban,
right.
bubble, yeah,
right. And so all those little things,
yep,
right. And so now we have going into Trump's second term, Now sovereignties are actually on the table. And it might be sovereignty as an app, as a startup, as a service, right? That might be what Trump is and co is basically building up. So he's saying, look, we're gonna achieve sovereignty, and we're gonna build a model, and you can have that model too. I mean, look, you got to pay for it. It's a little subscription. It may not be even money. It might be behavior. You might have to pay us by your behavior. You behave. And you do what we tell you to do, more or less. You follow the little guidelines and rules.
And stop working for those guys that have. And look, this is the thing I think that everybody's missing. The point you're making is a very powerful one, because what I'm getting at here is that, look, all these people want to be free from these we call them in my community TFP, these people, right? Everybody wants to be free from these people. So again, well, call them what you will. I don't care. Like you can put whatever label on them you want. And some people put, I'm open to all interpretations. It does not matter. What matters is the strategic aim of having to neutralize whoever they are. And the Iranian people want sovereignty. Nominally, supposedly the IRGC and the mullahs wanted sovereignty, but really? Did you really? Okay. Why are you? And same thing with, the Israelis, same thing with the Turks and this. How about they all can get it now? In the same way that when I started down this path in 2021, no longer being a libertarian retard.
God bless you.
The thing that popped into my head was, what if this was all started when Trump was elected? They put Powell in at the Federal Reserve to start the process with SOFR in order to begin building the foundation for American sovereignty. Now, if that's the case, then everything else is down. Everything else is downstream of that. Because remember, Trump came to power, didn't expect to win, and look, our globalist, terrible banksters, the J.P. Morgans and the Morgan Stanleys and the Goldman Sachs and all those guys, right? When there's no hope of getting out from underneath that system, they go along to get along. They got fiduciary interest. They got this. They got all those things. Same thing with the Israelis. You can argue with the Iranians. Same thing you can argue with the Turks, or or any of them, right? Well, the minute America, we the people, vote Donald Trump into power, and maybe, just maybe, Hillary Clinton wasn't lying when she said he didn't win the election, and she tried to blame the Russians for it, when she knew full well she couldn't blame Wall Street for it. She couldn't blame the Carlyle group or whoever was actually turning the dial on the election, because look, Trump won that election. Justin Raimondo did the postmortem at antiwar.com before he died. Like Trump, 100,000 votes, and Trump loses the election by 50 electoral votes. If the Amish don't show up, if the thing that he noted was that Trump won counties that he shouldn't have won, that had a high concentration of GWAT casualties. And all of those counties, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, these places, were the ones that gave him all those swing states. And it wasn't a lot of votes, folks. So, I'm not a religious man. I don't believe in providence. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I would like to, but I do believe that the universe has a plan. Right? I'm not privy to that plan. If you want to call that God, you go right ahead. I'm not here to do that. But something decided, maybe it was just us. We decided we didn't want to live in that future. In the same way, we didn't want to live in the future where Donald Trump got his head blown off on CNN. And we walked into one of those rare eigen states and all the possible futures, and said, we're going there. And there's this other 100 billion eigen states over there that got Donald Trump's head blown off. And we decided we don't want to live there. We want to live here. And that's the timeline we were inhabiting. And that's the world we live in. And if that's the way you have to justify it to yourself, this is what I've been doing just from that perspective. Again, in order to be non-denominational about it, in order to not put any kind of weird, this is just, we have agency. The way I like to present this concept is that we have agency, and everything they do is to demoralize us and tell us that we don't. And I'm like, no. How about you. That's why we're not doing that. And so the minute that happened, Wall Street and Carlyle Group and all these American sovereigntists, these American oligarchs saw their opportunity, handed Donald Trump Steve Mnuchin for Treasury Secretary. Mnuchin said, look, we need to we're going to make it, it's a Goldman Sachs administration. Why? Because Goldman saw the opportunity along with Morgan, and they handed him Jerome Powell. Jerome Powell pulls Plan R off the shelf, wing attack Plan R off the shelf. It's called SOFR. They say we need to move John Williams over to the New York Fed from the Atlanta Fed so that he can implement SOFR in a 5-year rollout plan. Bob's your uncle.
Everything you said is brilliant, Tom. Because one thing that was always bugging me is, especially with like SOFR to LIBOR to SOFR, it's like, why did they not stop it under Biden? Right? Why didn't they get rid of Powell under Biden? All the things.
They failed. Right now, I think you and I
either they failed or they were told by some other people, we'll let you mess around over here. Okay, here's where you can mess around. You do your auto pen and blah 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 blah. Right? Because we don't care about that. Right. But if you touch this, we touch you.
Well,
right.
You're correct, and that would be if you were speaking to anybody else, Jason, that would work. But I was watching all of this happen. They took their shot at Powell multiple times, and it failed. The insider trading scandal in November of 2021 got 3 of his hawkish lieutenants, Kaplan, Carita, and Rosengren, but couldn't get Powell because someone stood up and said, nah, Powell didn't do it. He's just trading spoos. Like, you know what I mean? He's just trading SPY futures. It's not a big deal. But Biden, meaning Obama, played around, and the factions within the Senate. This is the interesting part. This is the part that's going to validate both of our positions here. In that, what happened was they tried to not to not give Powell his confirmation hearing. It just ran the clock out until his term ended. And then when his term ended, that's when the Fed, the FOMC, who controls the FOMC? The very same people that I'm positing were the ones that put all of this in play in the first place, turned around and voted Powell chair until replaced by Senate confirmation. At that point, Biden, Obama, timeline runs out. They have to put him up for reconfirmation because he's going to be chair until they finally do something about it. He gets in there. He gets to the confirmation hearing. He gets 80 votes. He's back in for second term. And the second he is reconfirmed, he's raising interest rates. And they fought him raising interest rates. They didn't want him off the zero bound. They tried desperately that summer to pass Build Back Better and the infrastructure bill and all of that stuff in order to and they lied completely about the cost up front that this thing would be and everything else. And they wanted to saddle the Fed with another CARES Act, like $6 to $10 trillion worth of spending that the Fed would have to monetize and keep them at the zero bound. And it's interesting that when I had that like moment of clarity, right? I had that like Act 7 of an episode of House moment. I'm like, oh my God, is this what's happening? With the 5 basis points to change the world. I then, in a flash, saw the next 4 months worth of American politics, like in 5 minutes, right? And I said, okay, so then what's going to happen is that, because I saw what they did during COVID, right? To get Powell back to the zero bound. I'm like, oh, if this, then this, then, okay, fine. So this is what happened. I said, well, now they got to stop Build Back Better. Because if Build Back Better goes through, all of this fails because Powell's hands will be tied, just like they were after Trump signed the CARES Act in 2020. And guess what? And then I looked and I said, well, who would stand up in the Senate to block this? So it has to be squishy Democrats. And you want squishy Democrats? You want a miracle? In the immortal words of Hans Gruber, I give you the FBI. Oh, here's your miracle. Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. And I noted it would be those two. And by God, it absolutely was. And I watched them run it. And I watched them stand up in Congress, in the Senate, and the only way they were able to do so is if JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs were standing on their shoulder going, don't worry, Joe, no one's going to kill your kids. Don't worry, Kirsten. Your lesbian lover, she's going to live. Don't worry about it. You do this for us, everything will be fine. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened.
Okay, so I don't know how long we have you for.
I mean,
Tom, thank you.
This is the last thing I'm going to do before I go to bed. So don't worry about it. We're good. Yeah.
Because I want to. Okay, so where's Jamie Dimon in all this? I mean, I know where he is in this in the general
Jamie
story.
Dimon
There's a link up there too, right? So we have Powell. We have Powell in the Fed. We have Jamie Dimon in the private banks.
I think Dimon is the ringleader.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Clearly,
I think
he has to be.
He's a linchpin, but he's also the connecting point, and this is also for a defeater for everyone who goes, well, the Jews run the banks and everything like that. And okay, so if that's true, then riddle me this: why Jamie Dimon refused to take on European debt?
Exactly. See, it started with this is the thing.
Moves. Why is he making parallel moves with Powell and the Fed? And all of a sudden, Jamie Dimon goes, "Oh, and by the way, F Europe."
Yeah, no. What he did, he started the process. Jamie Dimon literally started the process in 2019 that led to COVID by saying, "I'm not going to repo European debt at par," which is what caused the SOFR blowout in September of 2019. That was the response to that. They took a nascent SOFR market that was illiquid because the SOFR hadn't been fully rolled out at that point, and they created that crisis. Again, I was watching all this happen, but I was analyzing it from the classic kind of Austro-libertarian retard perspective. And then I just said, okay, well, 6 months from now, the Fed's going to, I just said, this just feels like 2007, 2008 all over again. So, and then in 6 months, there's going to be a Bear Stearns. And I remember reading a couple of articles and people saying things like, yep, the Fed got everybody's attention and they've got about a 6-month halo effect over intervening in the repo markets. And then they're going to have to do something to fix what just happened. Well, that 6 months leads us to COVID. September to March, literally 6 months.
Right.
So,
which is part of my thesis is that a big part of my thesis, and this is a little conscientious for people, contentious, is that COVID, both the virus and the vaccine, was complete hogwash. It was a way to, the lockdowns is what they wanted.
Yes.
They wanted the lockdowns so they could pump money partly
yes.
to European banks to keep them from going under, and also to then trigger all these other, basically force the hand. Like it's almost like Trump gets into office, finds. You remember that? Just to go back to little interesting Trump moments. Remember when he went to the funeral? I think it was what was the state funeral? It was for
Bush. It was for
Bush Senior, right? And he comes in, and he handed out notes, little letters to all the previous presidents, Obama and Bush Jr. and Clintons and all that stuff. They all got the little cards, and they all opened it. And there's footage out there, people can find it, of them reading it and getting very upset and talking to one another and being very upset. And Trump was sitting there looking very pleased with himself. And I'm like,
I remember those. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I remember. I'm like, what did he write down? Now, in my little theoretical world,
just so you know, right, I'm going to light another one, so we got plenty of time. So you're good.
Trump finds something. Right? Trump's going through the files and he finds something, right? Finds the COVID plan, finds the whatever plan, right? And goes, and lets them know that he knows exactly what the plan was, right? And now he's in a position where they can trigger it. So we're not going to wait 10 years when you have it all figured out and you have your little panopticon and everything all set up. We're going to do it now.
You have to do it now.
Right? We're going to do it now.
COVID was a panic move to get rid of Powell, to stop SOFR, and to make sure that Trump didn't get a second term. That's been my thesis, Jason, since 2020, since like middle 2021. I've been operating like almost everything that I've been saying, and has gotten me in a lot of hot water with a lot of people and everything else, is that. And it still holds up today. It's more operative today than it was then, and it will continue to be operative because it's clearly what's happening, and it's why I don't have a lot of patience for every. That's why I looked at 10.7 and I'm like, oh, I know what 10.7 is. It took me a couple of weeks after the initial response and everything else and all the malinformation that filtered through the space. And I'm like, oh no, that's City of London throwing Israel under the bus. They have a rapidly depreciating asset that they need to use because the demographics in the United States are such that the younger generation, people younger than you and I are, I mean, you're 10 years younger than I am, but anybody 50 and younger in the United States has zero use for Israel. So as a political force within American politics, it's a use it or lose it asset. Right. And so, when I do these things, I very, I guess famously at this point, if I'm famous at all, is to say I always look at things from a strategic kind of board game perspective, right? I play strategic, but I used to play a lot of strategic board games. I haven't in a long time. I don't need to at this point. Now I do this for a living, but that's the way I look at things. You said earlier, you look at things from a particular perspective. You look at it from a people perspective, and
I look at it from a narrative perspective. I look at the story and the reason why.
I agree.
And we can sometimes get too locked into the story, and people think, oh, you're just, look. Right. I try popularizing the idea that I detest Saturday morning cartoon logic, which is. These guys are evil and these are the good guys, and these, here's G.I. Joe and here's Cobra, and Cobra's just bad for no good reason. They're just bad. They're just bad. And, or you get into the millennial thinking, which is everything's a shade of gray and, bad people can be good too. And like Vader was actually, the really hero. No. Or Frankenstein was a hero. I remember a next thing. I was no, that's retarded. Yeah. Frankenstein was a monster. Yeah. That's all there is to it. But that all being said, is the reason why I'm interested in the story aspect of it is because people think in stories. We tell stories about ourselves. We think in stories. And I, happen to work at a lot of high-end fine dining restaurants and rub shoulders with a lot of very, very extremely rich people.
Yes.
And I tell you, they talk in stories and they think about legacy. And they think and they tell stories about themselves and their families and all this stuff. You get them around a bar with a bunch of cigars and drinking really expensive bourbon, they tell stories.
Yep.
And they think in stories. Because they're human beings at the end of the day.
Right. At the end of the day, remember that story is the most important word in the English language. That's probably a new one for me, right? But I've always thought of it this way because I remember listening to a long time ago, in the early days when Jordan Peterson was like of all the rage, and he was talking about he was really talking about stories in that respect. I remember we went to see him in Jacksonville, giving a lecture, and that night he happened to be giving a lecture about the Egyptian creation myth and how it was a story so powerful that it sustained a civilization for thousands of years. And then he went into the mechanics of the story, and the mechanics of the story were insane, right? And there's like, all we have as human beings are the stories that we tell ourselves, ultimately. What I mean by that is that's what history is. It's an attempt to tell stories to the next, the leave behind for the next generation to learn from the mistakes of the previous generation. It's why we write shit down, it's why we develop language, it's why we do all these things. So at the end of the day, I love the fact that you're putting it from that perspective. So yes, I understand that. And then I started looking at the strategic stuff. And that's where and then I just start looking for data. Like I tell a story, like here's a story. How about this story? Can I prove that story is true in some way? Is there data that supports that story? Cool, great. And now strategically, what's the next move? Because then I can't stop thinking about what the next move would be. Because when you sit down at the table playing and you have to anticipate what somebody else is going to do next, and you've got hundreds of thousands of hours of doing that, just even when you do it badly. And I've many a game where I've gotten outplayed and, done it badly. And right. And you're like, yeah, he's probably got these decisions and he's got these decisions. And this is the right move. And then you watch everybody light their hair on fire when you've made the one move that no one wants you to make. And at that point, of course, you know that you've done the right thing. It's like going to the poker table and looking at the board and going, I got the, you play Texas Hold'em and you go, okay, I've got this hand. He raised pre-flop, he didn't, he did this, he did that. All these variables, I'm putting them on this hand. I've got this hand. That's the flop. Blah blah blah. Bet. Push all in. If I push all in after the turn, I push all in now. I put everybody on a time decision now. The timing on when certain moves open up. When I used to talk about it at the gaming tables, like I look for a targeting reticle. Can I win this turn? No. Okay. How do I survive until next turn? Right. And you take the 20 or 30 variables that you're trying to juggle in your head and the Bayesian probabilities of what everybody's range of action, their decision space can be, and then you do the thing. So when I'm analyzing this milieu, to use another horrible French word, that's what I'm doing. And it's a kind of heuristic that just kind of rolls over in my head over and over and over again. And sometimes that's how the crazy shit comes out, right? That's how you get the 5 basis points to change the world, for lack of a better term. That's how you get these moments. And the only way you can, and that doesn't mean I'm right when I do that, because I go on podcasts and I come up with an idea and I throw it out there and I say, I'm not saying I believe this, but here's the thing, right? And here's an idea. A couple weeks ago, I actually said, like a month and a half ago, I actually went through the entire scenario and I hated myself for it about, Netanyahu and his quest to stop the Iranians from getting a nuclear weapon. And I went, what if this was always the real story, and that the real story here is that Netanyahu's not the villain, but he's the hero? And I went, and it angered me. I was literally having a chat with like the guys I game with, and they're some of them they're all patrons, so we both game and like chat late at night, right? And it just hit me when we were just trying to figure out what the hell what the hell was going on in the Iran war, and I'm like, and I did a show with Andy Millett on natural resource stocks where I played that scenario out. I didn't say I believed it, okay? And I think probably that whole like digression that I went on is not operative. But if you don't explore that possibility, you're never going to find out if it's possible. You have to explore it. It's important. It's why hardening around an idea. The Jews run everything, for example, which is the one they're spoon feeding you. The minute they're spoon feeding you an idea, I'm like, no, I'm out. Like, no, I won't. I would rather die on the hill of being completely wrong about that until proven otherwise, when they're trying to spoon feed me a narrative. Because when I sit down and I go back over my entirety understanding of American history, I'm sorry, rarely has that narrative ever been operative, ever been true. It's whatever the one that
because they want to try to convince you that it's a little tiny country that was created that exists on outside investments whose entire GDP is run officially from making some transistors, a diamond mine, and Manischewitz is somehow running the fucking world. That was my. I did a rant. I did a rant last week where I was like, "Explain it to me. Explain it to me how a little tiny, basically microstate that only exists because people give it money, and to the bigger donors is like let's say City of London, whatever people, and America, right? And you're saying that they're running everything through Compromat? Well, you could just pull their funding and they go away in a week or whatever.
I know,
right?
It's silly. Yeah,
right. It is silly.
It's a children's story, as you so
Saturday morning cartoon.
Saturday morning cartoon.
Let me read out some super chats, and then I want to get to one last maybe where we can circle the wagons around this, which is wind conditions.
Why don't you do that for a bit, and I'm going to go run inside and grab something to drink so that I still have a voice. Okay, so you do that for a couple minutes, and I'll be right back.
All right. Let's read out these from Will Emmanuel. 50 Mexican dollars. Cheap sushi fund. I only have the finest sushis. Thank you, Max. Will Emmanuel, appreciate it. 10 euros from Mongo. Appreciate you, Mongo. It's difficult to explain to layman friends this great battle. You're trying to condense many hours of heady information with layers of complexity to people who are stressed out and don't want to hear it. Yeah, and if you do this enough, if you talk enough for a living, or even as a side gig, you start forgetting what you talked about. So you're like, was that a private conversation? Was that on a group chat? Was that like that I was just talking to myself one night? It gets confusing, but we're trying to do the best we can. King Pilled, Matthew Erickson, the man made out of hair, $9 American. Look at those handsome bastards. Two-time gang catching up now. Hope you're all catched up and still in the chat there, Matthew. Texas Davinsky, member for 22 months. My goodness. Howdy. And God bless you, sir. Sylvan Ogre is a new member. Another $9 freedom dollars from Matthew Erickson. I think it's deeply underappreciated that Besant has long, deep personal ties to Japan, has been there dozens of times, has known Ueda for years, also is yen short in 13 when he was with Soros. Yeah. Any idea about that?
Know that. Yeah. I didn't know that. So thank you, Matt. That's good to know. That more validated.
A wealth of information that
maybe, just maybe. And it's interesting. Well, it's interesting. If I understand the story correctly, Lutnick was going to be Treasury Secretary. And then Scott Bessent, and somebody brought Scott Bessent or whatever his name is, to Donald Trump, and they had a conversation. And 3 weeks later, he was Treasury Secretary. Like, they hit it off really well. And so I don't know if this was, again, set up, not set up, blah, 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 blah. But because now that you're saying, you make the tie to Ueda, to Besant, and Ueda's, emergence onto the scene predates Besant's emergence onto the scene. So how did I'm like, was this really set up a while ago? Because again, who tapped Kuroda's guy on the shoulder and said, no, you're not going to be BOJ president? Who tapped him on the shoulder? Because someone tapped him on the shoulder, right? So, and then why did we get Ueda? Who, from what I understand, wasn't a particularly distinguished member of the Bank of Japan or anything. He's just an old technocrat or an old, what I mean? Like, I don't know a lot about Kazuo Ueda. What I'm saying is, the people that I've followed who helped teach me about Japan didn't have a lot to say about him. Good or bad.
Maybe that's his strength.
Maybe that was his strength. Maybe he was, the Emperor Palpatine in waiting inside the Bank of Japan,
or just a man with a really good Rolodex. Infernal Morse, $5. What is the best class and why is it Warlock? Imagine playing a mage, spineless cowards, all of them. Make me some water and sit down. That is a WoW reference. And the person in the chat knows that I used to main a Warlock in Classic WoW. Okay. Another €5. Another €5 from Mongo. Banger stream. Yeah, tell me the whole Warlock thing. I've seen this pop up. I've never played WoW, so.
Yeah, no, that's a Warlock is just it is the best class in WoW. It's at least in Classic WoW. They've destroyed it since then. But in Classic WoW, like the Warlock was just, if you're a guy who likes to twiddle bits, if you're a guy that likes you can play the Warlock as brain dead simple as you want. Send pet, shadow bolt until you die begin, or if you want to go out into the world and juggle 5 mobs and and do the thing, well then you can make it as ridiculous as you want. And in Classic WoW, I was quite the good PvE Warlock, player versus environment Warlock. I was incredibly good as a control Warlock in a 5-man group. I could go out and solo multiple elites out in Winter Spring, which is the end game content. I could go out, solo 2 or 3 elite
Somehow,
frost giants at the same
somehow,
time.
somehow we need to get you and Asmongold together on a stream. I don't know
If
how we ever
I've
make that happen, but we make that happen, and
that,
yeah,
that would be. I find the whole Asmongold thing really funny, to be honest with you, because my daughter used to watch Asmongold when he was a WoW guy. I've known about Asmongold for a decade, and then watch him like remake himself into base dude is kind of funny, to be honest with you.
Matthew Erickson can back me up on this. I think it was in 2024 because I always watch him like occasionally, whatever his clips, and I started to see him do the political turn, and I was like, you guys got all eyes on Asmongold. We call him Patriot Gold over on King Gold's server, because it's like all eyes on this guy, because it doesn't matter. Like, he's a shit lib. He's that. Yeah. He commands millions of viewership, and his demo is between 13 and 25 mostly.
Yep,
that's powerful.
Oh yeah.
So if he's shifting based,
he did.
Right,
he did.
whatever, he's shifting millions of young men, primarily that direction as well.
He's become a very interesting figure, and I it could be easily just because that was the next grift that was in front of him, and he didn't want to play WoW anymore. It could have been an honest convert. I mean, I don't know, and I'm not here to condemn, judge, or anything else. Asmongold is what he is, and I find it interesting. And yes, he is an interesting figure from that perspective. And wouldn't it be great to bring all that together into you want to talk about some synergy, right? Because let's not even get started. Like there's so many things. Ask me why I play Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2. There's a reason for that has to do with great game design as opposed to bad game design and a variety of other things. So yeah.
Well, since we're talking about games, I think I brought this with EM. This has been a popular ball I like to kick around, narrative ball I like to kick around, because I don't feel enough people talk about this, is win conditions. Because a lot of times I think people assume them or never really define them, right? Like the Russia-Ukraine war. And Jim Jodgers and I went back and forth on this, and together trying to figure this out, right? And usually the sticking point is, what is the win condition? Like, what is Russia's win condition? Now they've stated one, but I'm like, denazification, okay, whatever, right? What's Ukraine's win condition? Right, to take back Crimea. Well, that was stupid. That's never going to happen. Like, you're fighting a nuclear power who can nuke you from orbit. No, you're not getting Crimea back. You're not getting any territory that Russia takes back. So what's the win condition? And like, a lot of people say, well, Ukraine's losing the war. I'm like, I don't think so. I think they're achieving their win condition, which is test out a whole bunch of toys, try to drag Russia deep into deep water, and by the way, just eviscerate the entire Ukrainian male population by either deportation, people fleeing, or through mass murder, right? Which is setting it up. Now the things that they wanted to do that for, that may not come to fruition, right?
Sure.
But in terms of a lot of their operational plans, I think they're scoring 10 out of 10s, right?
Yeah,
and by the way, keeping the British bond market from collapsing.
Because I agree. Yeah, because there's been too much. There's been too many loans created that are collateralized on the idea that Ukraine will eventually win the war, right? And they can get access to the cash flow streams of all the Russian assets.
So just one last. Let me just land this plan just really quickly.
Sure.
Because when we're talking about win conditions, we're talking about games, and you brought up games and said, I think the interesting question is this. And let's put it for Trump. Is Trump trying to win against the players, right? Is Trump trying to beat the players, or is Trump trying to beat the game? And I think Trump's trying to beat the game, the entire thing. Because you beat the game, you beat all the players too, or they're your friends now. They're part of your guild. They're on your side.
You change the nature of the game itself. I agree.
Right.
The British game of endless complication and endless colonization is the game that's ending, and Trump is trying to again. I when we have that kind of conversation, I keep flashing back to war games. Interesting game. The only way to win is to not play. right? And this is in the case of nuclear war or tic-tac-toe, nuclear war being reduced to tic-tac-toe, right? This is a similar thing. Like, I think Trump is trying to flip the game board of the endless game of what the way I used to describe it as a 7-player game of Go, and where, in a 7-player game of Go, it can't end because no one can build a stable structure that will survive six other players going, right? So stones keep constantly getting removed from the board so that the board never fills up, so that the game never ends. It just keeps going and going and going. And the British love that game because as long as we're focused on that game, then they get to run their system, British, Anglo-Dutch, call them what you want. I'm using City of London as a metaphor, not as the system. As long as the system continues, maybe the high table is a better, again, John Wick is a documentary, that as long as the system, as long as we're focused on the game and we're not focused on the system, then the system is eternal, right? It's the whole Philip K. Dick idea of the empire never ended, right? If you've ever read Michael Bishop's homage to Philip K. Dick called The Secret Ascension of Philip K. Dick is Dead, Alas, that's exactly what this is about. It's about, it's about that whole idea that the empire never ended. Even when Nixon is deposed and all of this stuff, it doesn't matter. But and this is partly where Phil was wrong about the time tracks and everything else. If you watch some of his old interviews, he really did think that Nixon being deposed was a net benefit for humanity, when clearly had probably missed the boat on that. But that's okay. I mean, Phil was a prophet in many, many ways, but he wasn't right about everything. But the general scope of where his brain was operating, because he was a brilliant human being, is understand that as long as the system is protected, then the game can go on forever. Well, what if you move the game from control of the game board to control of the system? And that's the game that Trump is playing. And that's what I've been trying to, and I guess, and it's good that you and I have had this, we've able to take this conversation this far, because I'm thinking now about how many times I've tried to explain this in podcasts and interviews and whatnot, and I just fail to land that concept. I get people there, and then I don't do a really good job of explaining that this is we move up. I was doing this with Dave Collins this afternoon, literally, Dave, yeah, you're right. You're looking at 9, you're looking at 10-7, you're looking at this, you're looking at that. Okay, you're looking at all these things, the Charlie Kirk murder, blah, blah, blah. You're in the game. But there's a group of people moving these pieces on the board in such a way, as long as the systems continue to be protected. That's the real war. That's the war that Trump is fighting. And that's why when he went to Iran on February 28th, that's the equivalent of, I used to play Shadow Fist, and I'm like, nope, I'm attacking there, and I got 2 power in my pool, and I'm holding the homemade tank in my hand. Right? You can't see it, but does he have the tank? Does he not have the tank? Does he have the tank? Does he not? And then what do I do? And then 5 people at the table all groan, and they all have to react. They all know at that moment they have to put 5 times the amount of resources in play to stop this attack. Because if I get this attack, if that one wins, if that one's successful, I get the follow-up attack, boom, 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 and the game is over. And so they all have to commit. And at that point, what I've done is effectively wipe the board clean. As I said earlier, can I win this turn? No. What can I do to ensure that I get another turn so that I can try and win next turn? Well, I got to get rid of all this crap that's on the board. And sometimes it was, I'm going to take that site. I'm going to win. I'm going to take that site and then take one more, and I'm going to win. And other times it was, oh no, the bluff is I get you to commit to everything, and then I kill everything. And then I effectively nuke war the whole board. I used to do this to people, and they were just same 3 cards over and over and over. I used to do this over and over and over again. And they're like, we know what you're doing. We can see the play, and they can't stop it because they don't know which of the 3 plays I'm going to play. Right?
To bring it back to geopolitics for a second, it's just that I think both Trump and Putin are calling the big bluff, and it's part of the system, right? The system is built to create conflict. right?
Yes.
Division and conflict. It's the old Hegelian thing, right? You create the two conflicts, you play the middle, and then eventually you bring it into synergism. This is where the satanic modalist, that kind of thing comes into play, right?
Agreed.
Like it's like the
Yep.
the motive behind the Fabian socialist, let's say, is that sense of like, we have the divisions, we maximize divisions, and then we bring into synthesis, right? So
Yes.
the union between communism and fascism is where the Fabian socialists are, and they want to bring that whole world into that. Like the global homo idea would be that synthesis.
Yep.
So as they're moving towards that, the idea is like, okay, what if we don't have the conflict, right? Because you keep telling me that Iran isn't, we can't attack Iran. Oh no, not Iran. Oh no, like they got mountains and stuff, right? But it's like, well, wait a minute. So did Afghanistan, right? Afghanistan was a thing that you could never beat, and then you beat them, kind of. Beat them enough, right?
Well,
could have beat them more.
The point
but,
is, again, back to your argument about win conditions. At the beginning of this war, what you saw was Trump defined winning in a particular way. Dugan and the Duganistas all defined winning for Iran in another way, knowing full well that Trump's goals were their win conditions were inevitable because Trump wasn't trying to do that. So basically, Trump said, I'm going to stop them from having a nuclear weapon. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And they said all Iran has to do to win is survive. Well, Trump's not trying to kill Iran off. So by definition, when you define your win condition that way, you've already won. Like rhetorically.
Also, if Trump wanted to kill off Iran, he could just block their Iran is having a water shortage, a critical water shortage. They're importing more water than they can produce. So if you cut off their water, they all die.
Yeah. I know.
That's the waiting game. It's like, okay, you don't play ball with us, we'll just cut off your water. Then what do you do, genius?
It's the seed.
Grow
right.
some.
So, right. So this is the water, food, this, that, all of this stuff. This all part of the strategy. And Trump never wanted to go there. And every turn of the war, every 10 days or every 15 days or so, he would turn around and go, "Yep, we have a deal." Now, this is why I believe that he's been actively negotiating with, and you said Trump and Putin already have a deal. Yes. Trump and Xi already have a deal. Trump and the emergent civilian government in Iran already have a deal. What they're doing is at every turn, every time they negotiate, get a deal, and then the deal every one of those deals crosses a red line for London and the IRGC. And then that deal provokes their reaction to extend the war and spend another asset, another part of the IRGC's remnant stuff, right? Oh, well, that guy in that, he's going to send that missile over there, and we're going to do a thing, and then it's going to extend the war another 10 days or 15 days or whatever. And then Iranians come back to the table, and we do the same kayfabe over and over, and they cross another red line, forcing another response, which keeps extending the thing. And then they just, they send their idiots out there to say, see, Trump's not winning and blah, blah. No, dude, this is clearly an operation to go no different than, look at what he did in, for the example, the LA riots is from last year, a perfect model for this. Hey, we're going to send ICE into a literal laundromat, which is a cartel money laundering operation. And we're going to do this, and we're going to watch the response. And then we're going to map the response. And then, oh, look, big response. They create a race riot, and they get the rent a beaner mob out there. God, I flubbed the joke. Damn it. They give us the rent a beaner mob,
and did more optic harm to themselves by having the rent a beaners all of a sudden running around with Mexican flags,
right?
And a lot of all the Republicans were like, huh? And a lot of squishy people in the middle were also. Right. I watched the reactions, and everyone's like, huh?
And they mapped, of course, all of the financial assets that had to be lit up in order to pay for the rent a beaner mob. Right. Well, it's the same model as what they're doing in Iran. They're just popping off another layer of IRGC faggotry like for lack of a better term. I like to link the word faggot and IRGC together because I want to issue a fatwa against myself. Like I do it on
I
purpose.
believe it's a scientific term, though. It is a scientific term.
So
I mean,
I know
they have the genes.
Good for you. You keep going. You pick up what I'm laying down. I'm going for it. So I like it. So that's what's happening. That keeps happening. But now we've reached the end of that system, right? Of that ladder, right? They've done the same thing with Putin over and over again, and in Ukraine, trying to get him to cross a red line that they can then turn him into Poodler and justify why we need to bring NATO in and all this silly stuff, right? Same thing in Iran. And unfortunately, today, the last couple of days, have proven to us that, nope, they're going to choose death. They're not choosing life. They've been given every opportunity to choose life. That MOU, yeah, it was a terrible deal. We should never have offered that to a country that lost a war. And we did it on purpose. Why? So that when they broke it, because we knew they would break it, everybody's like, yeah, you broke the deal. The United States gave you better terms than you had any right. They gave you the golden bridge to retreat across in Sun Tzu terms, and you chose not to walk across the bridge. All right. Well, now, unfortunately, the Iranian people have to pay because you've decided to sacrifice them as well. And that is really, this is where the strategist in me has to take a step aside. And the humanist, this is where Tom shows up and says, this is going to really suck. And it's, the Iranian people don't deserve this. But unfortunately, there's no other way to free them at this point, which is to starve them and to starve everybody out. It's siege warfare. At some point, that's where we have to go. And unfortunately, the emergent civilian leadership in Iran has not proven powerful enough to contain the chaos that exists. Now we can bring in Colonel Watkins' arguments about Operation Gladio style leave behind forces that are everywhere that all need to be burned out. That's happening in Iran. It's happening in Israel. It already happened in Syria. It's happening still in Ukraine. I think it's mostly done in Syria because Trump just took them off the sanctions list and took them off the state-sponsored terrorist list, meaning the guy Jolani is a terrible person. He's a bad guy. But if he's going to do the right thing of getting rid of all of these stay-behind forces, then cool. And same thing with Erdogan. Erdogan is not a nice guy. He's a terrible person. Netanyahu's not a nice guy. He's a terrible person. But, sometimes you got to use a terrible person to do the right thing, which is to get rid of even worse people. And then again,
Hezbollah. I can't understand why I see people carrying water for Hezbollah. I said on a show not too long ago and it kind of, I think, surprised people. I'm like, I'm very comfortable with Hezbollah not existing in the world. Because
of course,
okay, you want win conditions? Hey, you want to stop fentanyl and drug trade and all the rest of it in your country? You all think it's all cartels in Mexico. I'm like, that's Hezbollah, mate.
It's Hezbollah.
You get rid of Hezbollah, you get rid of half the heroin in the world. Well, I mean, temporarily. Of course, other markets will spring up, but right now, guess who traffics mostly in heroin? Hezbollah. Who does human trafficking? We're still against human trafficking, right? We think that's a really big bad thing in the world. That's Hezbollah, right? And I get it. I know a lot of Lebanese people think
who owns a lot of the strip clubs in the United States? Hezbollah. It's a cash business. How do you think Iran has been getting that money? How do you think they're funding those networks? These people all need to be disempowered. Some of those people, some parts of Hezbollah report back to London. Some of them report back to Putin in Moscow. Some of them report back to Xi in China. This stuff is everywhere, and you have to stop thinking in terms of this is at the beginning of the Venezuelan operation. I put out a tweet and a commentary saying, and I was kind of harping on this point over and over again. It's where the libertarians are failing is that they're talking about, they have such a simplistic heuristic, which if it's the state, it's bad. And if it's non-state, it's by definition better. That is a bad heuristic in a world where there are non-state actors who are worse than governments. And the non-state actors like Hezbollah, like the IRGC, like all of these people, the Houthis and this and all of it, and the non-state actors of the London banking cartel and the London P&I club in City of London and Lloyd's of London and headed by Lloyd's of London. These people are not state actors, and so the idea that we as the United States are committing acts of war by blowing up drug boats in international waters. Sorry, Rand Paul, that's not an act of war. It's international by definition. It's international waters. This is not by definition not an act of war, and the president does not need congressional approval for this. Period. He is well within his rights as the executive. If you don't like it, change the Constitution. You want to disempower the president? Go right ahead.
Yeah.
Feeling proud to take that lead.
And you're defending, drug cartels at the same time.
Right. At the same time.
I'm trying to be a good Christian and realize that everyone's life is valuable and everyone everyone's given the image of God. However, that being said, people who run illicit drugs and human beings, sometimes they get blown up. Sometimes we say pray for them, but we don't feel so bad about it because we're like, some things have to happen.
Some things have to happen. Some people choose death. Some people choose their fate, and you want to give them every opportunity to make the right choice. And then when they continue to make the wrong choice over and over and over again, when they go full Joker mode, which is they're going to burn it all down rather than submit. Okay. Sometimes the only way you can deal with a rabid terrier is to shoot it. And again, as you said, make your peace with that however you need to. This is part of the reason why I cannot bring myself back across to Christianity. Sorry, folks, can't do it. Raised Roman Catholic, can't do it.
No.
Because and that's me. And maybe that's a failing on my part as a human being. You can judge me however you want. It's fine.
I don't judge.
I'm comfortable with that. No, I know. I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to the audience. I was talking to the metaphoric you, not the you, not the personal you. I get it. You just basically sketched out the same thing. There is such a thing as Christian just war theory. And then Christianity is not pacifism to the point of self-extinction. Sorry, it's not.
Come to a Sunday liturgy. Come see. That's my offer to you. Okay, let's circle this back around to Japan, and then we'll bid everyone adieu. Okay, so let's tie all the knots together. Japanese bond market crisis, which I did foretell, right, was going to happen. It starts happening. Bond market collapse, crisis, all the rest of it, right? Now, this is something that I think has to happen. It's like whether it was going to happen no matter what. Far better that's happening under Trump. Now that it's happening, and as we see sort of, instead of a controlled demolition, we're seeing a controlled, what we call it, restructuring, right? Reimagining. Let's call it reimagining. We're reimagining how global economics works, because really, it's just a story anyways, right? No one really knows how any of this stuff really works. Other than Tom Luongo.
I don't know how it works.
Yeah.
I'm still a Padawan learner.
So maybe just for the benefit of the audience, to give them a little bow to tie on this. What's Tom Luongo's current thesis about what we see in the world coming out of Japan? We'll start with Japan and the bond market and the economy, and then going out to a general global synthesis as much as you can. And let's say between now and the end of the year.
Now and the end of the year, I think that the Japanese will continue to raise interest rates because they have to. They're going to raise their own benchmark lending rate in order to grind out the currency arbitrage game that is what keeps the City of London and its proxies running. I think that's the first part. I don't think Ueda is going to stop raising rates. He may only raise one more time before the end of the year. He may raise twice. So I may have my original projection that we'd get somewhere near 2% on both the Fed funds rate and the Bank of Japan's benchmark rate. Probably going to be wrong about that, folks. Okay, well, you win some, you lose some, but the general trend is exactly the same. Kevin Warsh is not going to raise rates, no matter what the bond markets tell you that is going to happen. They're wrong. So the big question is the midterms. Can Trump get can Trump survive and with some form part of the legislature intact? Does he have to go to an emergency, a state of emergency over the election? John Thune is clearly doing everything he can to run out the clock. Mitch McConnell's handlers have bound down the Senate Rules Committee. All of that stuff is terrible. I think, given what I'm seeing in the polls and everything else, I think Trump has enough cachet with the voters that will hold on to majority in the House. I think he'll make the argument that, look, the GOP has fought me tooth and claw, but I still need them to do in order for me to do what I need to do. If you give me the midterms, I'm going to be able to wrangle them into shape. That may be a tall order, but that may be a hard sell. He's got 3 months to make that argument. I think he can get it done. So when that happens, then we're going to watch if he survives the midterms, and he's got a slim majority in the House, but it's a more real majority than he currently has. Same thing in the Senate. The capital markets are going to understand that, and that's going to be the signal that they've been waiting for. And you're going to see money flow into the United States. You're going to see the long end of our curve at a minimum stabilize. It may not rally, but it's going to certainly stabilize. And you'll see Europe having to dump their collateral, meaning U.S. Treasuries, into the market to defend their currencies. And then we're off to the races with the collapse of the European Union and all of the rest of it. It's for all the marbles, folks. I'm not gonna lie here. The opposite is that we lose. And so what I'll tell you is which outcome do you want? I know I know the outcome that I want, and it's not about Trump. It's about what America can do as a thing, as a constitutional republic, if it survives, if the institutions itself bend but don't break. And what we have right now is an attempt to break our institutions in a way that is irrevocable. That's what I see. And that's what scares me. And that's why I got to, carve out time to go to the range, frankly. But, it's not a joke, unfortunately. It's just the truth. But I think Americans understand the problem. I saw a poll tonight that Tina Kotek in Oregon the polls have her losing in Oregon to a Republican. The Republican she beat by 3 points the last time. That's a big one. The general House map has the GOP holding as long as it wins a couple of toss-ups. Well, if Trump and Harmeet Dillon and everybody, they just, shore up those seats where they're most likely to cheat the most, great. We'll be okay. But again, is it going to be a game of whack-a-mole? They focus on those seats, and then the Democrats run, a thing on, Soros, and the rest of them run an operation on other squishy, more seats that are more purple than you think they are. I don't know. I'm going to lay it out this way. What outcome do you want? That's the one that's most likely to manifest. So, hey, put away the black pill. And
yeah, like I said on the stream,
and just stay optimistic. Look at what happened look at what's happened during this World Cup. Look at what's happened during the 250th anniversary. The World Cup was beautiful. well, whatever. Yeah, call it what
You
you
know,
want.
but that
Yeah,
I'm saying that
yeah.
the World Cup was basically a
The
World's
World Fair.
Fair.
Yeah, it was. And guess what happened? A whole bunch of Europeans and everybody came over here from around the world and went, "We've been lied to. Americans are cool." And even if some of that is propaganda, even if some of this are astroturf and for YouTube clicks or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's good counter programming, and we're allowed to play the same game that they play. You know, that's the game they're going to play. I like to engage in a little fifth generation warfare, don't you? Isn't that kind of what we're doing?
Patriots get a vote too.
Exactly. The enemy is not the only one that gets a vote. Patriots get a vote. I like that. That's good.
Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames and messieurs, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for the super chats. Continue to support the show every way, which way you can. There's tons of ways supporting the show in the description below. Also down below in the description are links to Tom's X profile and over to his website, Gold Goats and Guns.
Ready?
Gold Goats and Guns.
Ready?
Go check that out.
Savings, investment, defense. You'll never get it. You'll never get the order wrong again.
That's not going to help me.
Investment, goats, defense. You have to defend the other two. Guns always come last. You have to defend yourself. Guns.
I just have to repeat it another 1,000 times and,
there you go.
whip myself with the branch
and a wet 50 lashes with a wet noodle.
Right. Hey, there's the Italian in you coming out. Folks, thank you so much. Please go follow Tom's. Thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
And we will do this hopefully again sometime soon.
This was good to catch up, Jason. I'm glad you threw the invite out. I'm glad we put this together. Thank you. It was a good time.
Stick around. Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames and messieurs, I am Jason Marinchuk, and it's later than you think.